6 months later, Zixtai sat in a briefing room at Coalition headquarters on Arcturus Station. The walls were sterile, white metal. The air smelled like recycled atmosphere and electronic equipment. Everything was clean and organized and logical. Nothing like the human base on Kepler 4 for 2b. Admiral Valthera, the Coalition's senior military advisor, finished reviewing Zixtai's footage for the third time. The four-armed Altarian's face showed the same expression of confused disbelief that had appeared during the first viewing. "This cannot be accurate," Admiral Valthera said. "You're telling us that humans achieved victory by disarming themselves in front of the enemy?" "That's what I recorded," Zixtai replied. Major Thompson ordered her soldiers to surrender their heavy weapons as a gesture of good faith. The Hive Queen interpreted this as proof that humans were not seeking genocide. And then what happened? Zixtai activated his recording equipment. The holographic display showed the Queen Chamber 6 months ago. Major Thompson standing in front of the massive alien ruler. 57 exhausted human soldiers, surrounded by thousands of enemies. The Queen agreed to a ceasefire, Zixtai said, but she wanted to test human intentions before agreeing to permanent peace. The recording showed what happened next. The Queen had demanded that humans prove their commitment to protecting innocent lives. She ordered her warriors to bring captured human civilians into the chamber. Men, women, and children who had been taken during the early fighting. "Choose," the Queen had said to Thompson. "Save your soldiers and leave the civilians, or risk everyone to save strangers." Any reasonable military commander would have saved the soldiers. Trained personnel were more valuable than civilians. The mission came first. Thompson had ordered her soldiers to escort the civilians to safety, even though it meant staying in the chamber longer and facing more enemies. She risked 57 trained soldiers to save 93 civilians. Admiral Valthara said, reading from the report, "This violates every principle of resource management." The Queen was testing human values, Zixtai explained. She wanted to know if humans would sacrifice their own people to save others. And what was the result of this test? Zixtai switched to another recording. This one showed the surface of Kepler 4 to be 3 weeks after the battle. Where the human base had been, a new city was growing. Humans and hive creatures worked together, building structures that mixed human engineering with hive biological architecture. The Queen declared humans to be Ness friends, Zixtai said. A concept that doesn't translate well, but it means something like family members who are not related by blood. The hive withdrew from all human territories and offered a mutual defense agreement. Admiral Valthara paused the recording on an image of human children playing with young hive creatures in what had been a battlefield 6 months earlier. "This makes no strategic sense," the Admiral said. "The humans achieved total victory and then shared it with their enemies." "They achieved something better than victory," Zixtai replied. "They achieved peace." The briefing room door opened and General Patricia Clark entered. She was a tall human woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations except a small pin that showed a human and hive creature shaking hands. "Admiral," General Clark said, nodding to Valthera, "I understand you have questions about our methods." "General Clark, your species' approach to warfare seems designed to maximize casualties while minimizing strategic gain." Clark sat down across from them. "That's one way to look at it. Another way is that we're designed to minimize future wars by maximizing current understanding." "Explain." "Every species fights for something," Clark said. "Territory, resources, survival, dominance. We fight for the right to stop fighting. When we win a war, our goal is to make sure we never have to fight that enemy again." Admiral Valthara's forearms moved in a gesture that indicated confusion. "This is achieved through total defeat of enemy forces. Sometimes, but total defeat creates resentment. Resentment creates revenge. Revenge creates new wars." Clark activated her own holographic display. Here are casualty figures from the last 50 coalition conflicts. The display showed numbers that made ZXD's recording devices automatically activate stress protocols. Each conflict ended in victory for coalition forces, Clark continued. Each victory required follow-up conflicts within 10 years because the defeated species rebuilt and attacked again. Average duration of peace between conflicts, 7.3 years. She switched to a different set of numbers. Here are results from the last 20 conflicts involving human forces. The casualty numbers were higher for the initial conflicts, much higher, but the follow-up conflicts were almost non-existent. Average duration of peace after human-mediated conflict resolution, 47 years. In most cases, former enemies become allies within 5 years. Admiral Velthara studied the numbers. Your losses are significantly higher than standard coalition tactics would produce. In the short term, yes. In the long term, we save lives. By the millions. We also gain allies instead of creating vengeful enemies. ZXD thought about his time on Kepler 442b. He had watched humans die for principles that seemed to make no sense. Private Lisa Carter holding a position to save wounded strangers. Corporal Tony Baker, destroying himself to protect others. Private Nick Johnson, taking a killing blow meant for an alien correspondent. The galaxy thinks humans are primitive because we fight with simple weapons, Clark said. But our weapons aren't primitive. They're restrained. We could build we could engineer viruses that target specific genetic markers. We could wage war on a scale that would terrify every species in the coalition. Why don't you? Admiral Velthara asked. Because winning isn't the point. Building something better than what existed before the war is the point. Clark stood up and walked to the window that showed Arcturus Station's docking bay. A ship was landing that carried both human and hive markings. That's Captain Scott Miller, Clark said. He lost his entire squad during the siege of Kepler 442b. Now he runs refugee services on 3 former hive worlds. The beings he helps rebuild their cities are the same species that killed his friends. How is that possible? ZXD asked. Because the war is over, Clark replied. And Scott understands that the hard part isn't winning wars. The hard part is building peace that lasts long enough for everyone to forget why they were fighting in the first place. Clark left the briefing room. Admiral Velthara sat in silence for several minutes, studying the recordings and casualty reports. This will be classified at the highest levels, the Admiral finally said. The coalition military structure is not prepared for these concepts. Why? ZXD asked. Because if other species learn that there are alternatives to perpetual conflict, it changes everything. Our entire military-industrial complex is built on the assumption that wars are inevitable and permanent solutions are impossible. ZXD gathered his recording equipment. In a few hours, he would file a heavily edited report that would tell the galaxy almost nothing about what he had actually witnessed. The truth about human warfare would remain secret, not because it was too terrible to share, but because it was too hopeful for a universe that had accepted eternal conflict as the natural state of existence. Outside the station windows, former enemies worked together to build something that had never existed before in galactic history, a peace that might actually last. The Queen Chamber was the size of a coalition battleship hangar. ZXD's recording equipment struggled to capture the full scale of it. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. The walls were covered with a substance that looked like hardened mucus, punctured by thousands of holes where hive creatures lived and bred. At the center of it all was the Queen herself. She was the size of a small building. Her body was mostly a massive egg-laying organ that pulsed with a rhythm like a giant heartbeat. Around her, thousands of worker drones tended to clusters of eggs that glowed with soft bioluminescent light. Jesus Christ, whispered Major Julie Thompson, the highest-ranking human to survive the descent through the tunnels. Look at the size of that thing. 57 humans had made it this far. They crouched behind fallen rocks at the chamber entrance, staring at an enemy force that outnumbered them 200 to 1. Thompson raised her hand and made quick gestures. The humans spread out along the chamber walls, moving through shadows and using the strange geometry of hive construction to stay hidden. Zixtai followed Sergeant Carlos Martinez toward the left side of the chamber. Martinez carried a demolition pack that could collapse a small building. His job was to plant it near the Queen's egg clusters. Why not just destroy everything? Zixtai asked as they climbed over a ridge of hardened biological material. One large explosive could eliminate the entire chamber. Martinez looked at him like he had suggested poisoning a water supply. You see those eggs over there? The ones that are smaller and different colors. Zixtai looked where Martinez was pointing. Mixed in with the regular hive eggs were clusters that looked different. Some were blue instead of the usual yellow-green. Others had patterns of spots or stripes. Those are from hive queens that surrendered during other battles, Martinez explained. The big queen keeps them safe while they grow. If we blow up everything, we kill babies that never hurt anyone. This made no tactical sense. Enemy offspring would grow up to be enemy soldiers. Every military manual recommended destroying breeding facilities completely to prevent future conflicts. But as they moved closer to the egg clusters, Zixtai saw something that changed his understanding of the entire war. Human soldiers were marking certain areas with small flags, not targets for destruction, areas to protect. Blue section is off limits, Lieutenant Sam Wallace whispered into his communication device. Those eggs belong to the Centauri hive that signed the peace treaty last month. Green section has mixed clutches from colonies that are negotiating surrender. Only destroy the red sections. They were in the middle of a life or death battle, outnumbered and surrounded by enemies, and the humans were taking time to identify which enemy children they were allowed to kill. Thompson's voice came through the communication system. Remember? People, we're here to end a war, not start a genocide. Watch your targets and make every shot count. The battle began when a hive drone spotted Martinez setting his charges. It let out a shriek that echoed through the chamber like a broken siren. Every creature in the space turned toward the humans. What happened next violated everything. Zixtai knew about combat mathematics. The hive warriors charged in organized waves. They had superior numbers, better knowledge of the terrain, and natural weapons that could cut through human armor. They should have overwhelmed the humans in minutes. Instead, the humans turned the Queen Chamber into a maze of crossfire and killing zones. They used the egg clusters as cover, but never fired shots that would damage the protected areas. They fought a three-dimensional battle on the walls and ceiling, using equipment designed for zero-gravity operations. Corporal Lisa Hayes climbed up the chamber wall, using magnetic clamps and a rope. She reached a position where she could fire down on hive warriors without hitting any eggs. When her rifle ran empty, she tied the rope around her waist and swung across the chamber like some ancient warrior, firing a pistol in each hand. "Hayes, you crazy woman!" Martinez shouted as she landed next to him. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Stupid enough to work," Hayes replied, reloading her weapons. But the humans were losing. For every hive creature they killed, 5 more took its place. Their ammunition was running low. Several soldiers were wounded badly enough that they could barely stand. Then something unexpected happened. The Queen made a sound that Zixtai had never heard before. It was not the shriek of combat or the hiss of aggression. It sounded almost like music, but sad and tired. The attacking hive warriors slowed their advance. Some of them stopped entirely, looking back at their queen with confusion. "What's she doing?" Thompson asked. Before anyone could answer, the queen spoke. Her voice came from somewhere deep in her massive body, translated by implants that all coalition species carried for communication. "You protect the young ones that are not yours," the queen said. Her words echoed through the chamber. Even in battle, you spare the innocent. Thompson lowered her weapon. We don't make war on children, any children. This is not the way of conquest, the Queen said. This is not the way of territory expansion. Why do you fight us, if not for domination? We fight because you attack civilian populations, Thompson replied. We fight because you threatened people who could not defend themselves. We stop fighting when you stop threatening them. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. Around the chamber, Hive warriors held their positions, but did not advance. The humans kept their weapons ready, but did not fire. Show me, the Queen said. Thompson looked confused. Show you what? Show me that you speak truth? Your weapons can destroy this chamber, and everything in it. You have explosives. You have the power to eliminate all future generations of my species. Show me that you choose not to use this power. Thompson made a decision that military historians would argue about for centuries. She opened her communication channel so every human in the chamber could hear. All units, stand down. Remove demolition charges from the Queen chamber. Anyone with grenades or heavy explosives, stack them at the chamber entrance. Major, Martinez said quietly, if this goes wrong, we have no way to complete the mission. If this goes wrong, Thompson replied, the mission was wrong to begin with. One by one, the humans placed their most destructive weapons in a pile near the chamber entrance. They kept their basic rifles and pistols, but they gave up the tools that could level the entire nest. The Queen watched this with eyes that reflected the humans' flashlights. You make yourselves vulnerable to show good faith. We make ourselves honest, Thompson said. We're not here to exterminate your species. We're here to make you stop killing ours. And if we agree to stop, if we withdraw from human territories, and respect your boundaries, what guarantees do you offer? Thompson thought for a moment. The same guarantee we've given to every species that's made peace with humans. We help you rebuild what was damaged in the war. We share medical technology and food production methods. We treat former enemies as future neighbors. Zixtai realized. He was recording the moment when everything changed. Not just the battle, but the entire concept of how wars could end. The Queen was considering an offer that no species in galactic history had ever made to a defeated enemy. Not just peace, but partnership. The massive creature shifted her bulk, and thousands of eggs moved with her like a living tide of potential futures. 3 weeks after the first battle, Zixtai could count his ribs through his skin. The supply drops had stopped coming 5 days ago. Hive fighters controlled the skies now, shooting down anything that tried to reach the base. Major Alex Turner called it rationing. The humans called it starving slow instead of starving fast. Each soldier got 1 meal pack per day. The packs were designed to feed a human for 3 days. Zixti watched them divide the small portions even further, giving half to the civilians in the underground shelters. This is not sustainable, Zixtai told Colonel Morrison during one of their daily briefings. Your soldiers are becoming too weak to fight effectively. Morrison looked up from a map covered in red marks. Each mark represented a hive position that had grown closer to the base. Sustainable, Morrison repeated the word like it tasted bad. You know what's not sustainable? Watching kids starve while we eat full meals. My soldiers would rather die, fighting on empty stomachs, than live knowing they let innocents suffer. This violated every principle of military logic. Soldiers needed calories to maintain combat effectiveness. Civilians were a secondary priority during active combat situations. The coalition had protocols for these decisions, but Zixtai had learned to stop comparing human actions to coalition protocols. The results spoke for themselves. Despite being hungry and tired, the humans kept fighting with the same intensity as the first day. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez proved this point better than anyone else. She was a small woman who looked like a strong wind could knock her over. But every night, she crawled through air ducts and maintenance tunnels to reach civilian shelters in parts of the base cut off by hive tunneling operations. Zixtai followed her one night, his recording equipment catching everything in the green glow of night vision. The tunnels were barely wide enough for a human body. Metal edges cut into their clothes and skin. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burning electronics. "Why do you do this?" Zixti whispered as they crawled through a section where water dripped from broken pipes above them. "Do what?" Gonzalez asked. "Risk your life for civilians who contribute nothing to the defense effort." Gonzalez stopped moving. In the narrow tunnel, Zixti could not see her face, but he heard her breathing change. "Contribute nothing," she said. "You think old people and kids contribute nothing? From a military standpoint, they consume resources without providing combat capability." "Listen to me carefully," Gonzalez said. Her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Those people down there, they're the reason we're fighting. Not for territory, not for strategic advantage. For them, every time I bring them food, every time I see them smile when they think they're going to live through another day, I remember why we're here." They reached the shelter. 37 humans lived in a space designed for 10. Families huddled together on sleeping bags and blankets. Children who should have been playing were helping adults conserve water and organize supplies. Gonzalez distributed her own food rations among the families. Not surplus food, not extra supplies. Her own meals for the next 2 days. "Sergeant, you need to eat too," said an old man with silver hair. "I'll eat when everyone else eats," Gonzalez replied. "Until then, we share what we have." An explosion shook the tunnel above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. The children moved closer to their parents, but no one cried or screamed. They had learned to be quiet during attacks. "How long can we keep doing this?" asked a woman holding a baby. "As long as it takes," Gonzalez said. "Humans don't give up on people, ever." On the way back, Zixtai asked more questions. "What happens when you run out of food completely?" "Then we eat less. And when you run out of ammunition, then we fight with knives. And when you run out of knives..." Gonzalez was quiet for a long moment. "Then we fight with rocks and broken metal. And when we run out of those, we fight with our hands and teeth." This was not bravado or empty threats. Zixtai had seen enough human combat to know they meant every word. The breaking point came on what the humans called Black Tuesday. Intelligence reports indicated the hive had located the main nest entrance under the base. They were planning to flood the tunnels with workers and warriors, collapsing the entire defensive structure from below. Commander Ben Foster gathered the remaining combat troops in the main bunker. 230 soldiers. Less than a third of their original strength. Most were wounded. All were hungry. "Here's the situation," Foster said, pointing at a map of underground passages. "The Hive Queen is down there, about 2 kilometers below us, surrounded by maybe 10,000 defenders. If we don't take her out in the next 6 hours, she'll bring down this entire plateau. 10,000 enemies. 200 human soldiers." "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, "the odds are..." "Impossible." "Impossible," Foster agreed. "Good thing we're too stupid to know that." Some of the soldiers laughed. Others just checked their weapons and equipment. "I won't lie to you," Foster continued. "Most of us won't come back from this. Maybe none of us. But those civilians upstairs will have a chance. And sometimes that's all you can do. Give people a chance." They descended into darkness. The tunnels were full of hive creatures that had never seen sunlight. Their eyes reflected the humans' flashlights like tiny stars. The air smelled like rotting meat and acid. Private First Class Nick Johnson walked beside Zixtai, carrying extra ammunition for the squad's heavy weapons. He was 19 years old and had joined the military 6 months ago. "Are you afraid?" Zixtai asked him. Johnson thought about the question. "Yeah, I'm scared. But being scared doesn't change what needs to be done." They reached the first chamber. Hive warriors filled the space like a living carpet. The humans formed a line and started shooting. The sound of gunfire in the enclosed space was deafening. Johnson was reloading when a Hive warrior broke through the line. Its claws aimed for Zixty's recording equipment, which was generating light and sound that attracted their attention. Johnson threw himself between them. The creature's claws went through his chest instead of the correspondence cameras. "Keep recording," Johnson whispered as his blood mixed with the dirt on the tunnel floor. "People need to know what happened here." He died holding a grenade with the pin pulled out. The explosion cleared the chamber, but cost the humans their youngest soldier. Zixty realized he was documenting something the galaxy would never understand. These humans fought like they had already accepted death, which somehow made them more dangerous than any enemy he had ever seen. The tunnels stretched deeper into the earth, and the humans kept advancing into darkness that seemed to have no end. The attack came before dawn. Zixty woke to sirens and the sound of humans running through the tunnels. He grabbed his recording equipment and followed the noise outside. The sky was still dark, but flashes of light came from the south, not the clean white beams of Coalition energy weapons. These were orange and red explosions that lit up the clouds like angry lightning. "Move, move, move," someone shouted. Human soldiers ran past Zixty carrying weapons and ammunition boxes. None of them looked panicked. They looked focused in a way that made his skin crawl. Lieutenant Rodriguez appeared beside him. Her armor was already dirty, and she had a cut on her forehead that leaked blue human blood. "North wall is breached," she said, talking into a small communication device. "Hive swarms are through the outer perimeter. Estimate 5,000 hostiles moving toward Sector 7. 5,000. Zixty had seen Coalition forces retreat when facing odds of 3-1. The humans at this base were outnumbered 6-1, and Rodriguez sounded like she was giving a weather report. "Should we evacuate the civilians?" Zixty asked. Rodriguez looked at him like he had suggested they burn down their own base. "Evacuate to where?" "The Hive controls everything for 200 kilometers. We hold here, or everyone dies." She ran toward the north wall. Zixty followed, his recording devices capturing everything. The humans had built their defenses in layers: outer walls, inner walls, and underground tunnels that connected everything. It looked chaotic, but as they moved through it, Zixty began to see the pattern. Every position had multiple escape routes. Every wall had firing points that covered other walls. The humans had built their base assuming they would lose parts of it and need to keep fighting from what remained. Coalition military doctrine focused on preventing breaches. Human doctrine seemed to assume breaches would happen and planned accordingly. They reached a section where the wall had been blown apart. Hive creatures poured through the gap like black water. Each one was the size of a human but moved on 6 legs with claws that could cut through metal. Their heads were mostly mouth, filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Private Lisa Carter crouched behind a pile of rubble, firing her rifle into the mass of creatures. She looked no older than 20. Her hands shook as she reloaded, but she never stopped shooting. "Fall back to secondary positions," someone yelled over the combat noise. Carter looked around. Behind her, a group of wounded humans was being moved through a narrow passage. They would need another 30 seconds to clear the area. She could have run, should have run. Any reasonable soldier would have followed orders and retreated to safety. Instead, Carter stood up and walked toward the breach. "What is she doing?" Zixty whispered. Rodriguez grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "What humans always do, something stupid and brave." Carter reached the gap in the wall and started shooting faster. Hive creatures focused on her, trying to reach the human who was blocking their path. She killed the first wave, then the second. Her rifle ran out of ammunition. Instead of retreating, Carter pulled out a combat knife. It was a simple piece of sharpened metal, maybe 20 centimeters long. She held it in both hands and kept fighting. A hive warrior twice her size knocked her down. She rolled away from its claws and stabbed it in what might have been its neck. Black fluid sprayed across the rocks. More creatures reached her. Zik wanted to look away, but his job was to record what he saw. Carter disappeared under a pile of claws and teeth, but she had bought enough time. The wounded humans made it to safety. Sector 7 clear, Rodriguez said into her communication device. Outer wall lost. Carter is down. She said it like she was reading numbers from a supply list. But Zixty saw her hands clench into fists. Captain Rick Hayes arrived with reinforcements. 40 humans carrying weapons and wearing expressions that made Zixty think of natural disasters. They looked at the breach where Lisa Carter had died. We're taking it back, Hayes said. This was insane. The gap was filled with hive creatures. More were coming through every second. The smart move was to fall back to the next defensive line and establish a new perimeter. Hayes looked at his soldiers. Remember what Carter just did. Remember why she did it. Now let's go get our wall back. They charged. Not a careful advance, with covering fire and tactical movement. They ran straight at the breach like they were racing each other to see who could reach the enemy first, and they were singing. Zixty had read about this in the reports, but hearing it was different. Human voices raised together in some ancient war song. The words made no sense, but the sound sent vibrations through his bones. The hive creatures seemed confused by this. They had evolved to fight prey that ran from predators. Humans were running toward them while making loud noises. Hayes reached the breach first. He carried an automatic rifle in one hand and a metal club in the other. When his rifle ran empty, he kept fighting with the club. When the club broke, he picked up rocks. Behind him, his soldiers followed his example. They fought like the universe was ending, and nothing mattered except holding this one piece of ground. The hive creatures were individually stronger and faster than humans. They had better weapons built into their bodies. They had superior numbers, but they fought like rational beings. They tried to minimize their own casualties while achieving their objectives. When the costs became too high, they would retreat and find an easier path. Humans fought like they had forgotten how to retreat. Zixty watched Corporal Tony Baker grab an explosive device from his belt. Instead of throwing it at the enemy, Baker ran directly into the largest group of hive warriors. He disappeared in a flash of light and smoke. When the smoke cleared, the breach was blocked with fallen rocks and dead creatures. The remaining hive warriors pulled back, looking for another way through the defenses. North wall secure, Hayes reported. His voice was calm, but Zixty could see him shaking. Rodriguez helped wounded soldiers back to the medical station. How many did we lose? She asked. Carter, Baker, and Jensen. Williams might make it if the medics can stop the bleeding. 3 dead, 2 hold one section of wall. In coalition warfare, those would be unacceptable losses. The position would have been abandoned after the first casualty, but the humans had held, and somehow, impossibly, they had won. Zixty realized he was recording something the galaxy had never seen before. These humans did not fight wars. They fought disasters, and they treated every battle like the end of everything. The artillery in the distance kept rumbling, but now it sounded different to Zixty, less like a storm and more like a heartbeat. Zixty pressed his 6-fingered hand against the transport window and watched the planet grow larger below. Kepler 442b looked like a brown and gray marble against the black of space. Smoke rose from 3 different continents. The war had been going on for 8 months now. The Velteron correspondent had covered 43 conflicts across the galaxy. He knew what war looked like. Clean orbital strikes, quick ground sweeps, surrender negotiations within weeks. The Galactic Coalition fought wars like they solved math problems. Calculate the odds, apply the right pressure, wait for the logical outcome. Humans were different. Everyone said so. But Zixtai had read the reports. The newest coalition species fought with basic weapons. They used simple tactics. Their technology was centuries behind the others. How different could they really be? First time seeing a human, Warzone, asked Commander Velkin from the pilot seat. The four-armed Zelthran had been flying coalition transport ships for 30 years. Yes, the coalition wanted a fresh perspective on human military capability. Velkin made a sound that might have been laughter. Fresh perspective. Right. Just remember what I told you about humans and logic. They don't mix well. The transport ship shook as they entered the atmosphere. Zixtai checked his recording equipment one more time. The small devices would capture everything he saw and heard. His job was simple. Document how humans fight. Show the galaxy what their newest allies could do in battle. Forward operating base Horizon sat on a flat plateau surrounded by steep cliffs. The base looked nothing like coalition military installations. Instead of the clean geometric shapes Zixtai expected, he saw a maze of trenches, bunkers, and walls made from local stone and metal. Smoke drifted up from cooking fires. Humans walked between the structures, carrying weapons that looked crude, compared to coalition energy rifles. The landing pad was a circle of flat ground marked with white stones. As soon as the transport touched down, 6 humans ran toward them. They wore thick armor painted in brown and green patterns. Their faces were covered with helmets that had dark eyepieces. "Stay close to me," Velkin said. "And whatever you do, don't ask them about casualties. Humans get weird when you talk about their losses." Zixtai grabbed his equipment bag and followed the commander down the transport ramp. The gravity felt heavy. The air tasted like metal and smoke. In the distance, he heard a sound like thunder that went on too long. "That's artillery," said one of the humans, walking up to them. She pulled off her helmet, showing a face with dark skin and short black hair. "Hive position's about 20 kilometers south. They've been pounding us all morning." Zixtai had studied human biology before the trip. This female looked young, maybe 25 standard years. Her eyes held an expression he had seen in veterans of much longer wars. "I'm Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez," she said. "Colonel Morrison is waiting for you in the command bunker. We'll get you settled first." They walked through the base. Zixtai saw humans doing things that made no sense from a military standpoint. Soldiers shared their food with others who had already eaten. Wounded humans who could barely walk were helping carry supplies. A group of mechanics worked on vehicles while other humans stood guard. But the guards kept looking back to help with repairs instead of watching for threats. "How many humans are stationed here?" Zixtai asked. "About 800 combat troops," Rodriguez said, "plus another 200 support staff. We're also sheltering roughly 3,000 civilians from the city below." Zixtai stopped walking. "Civilians? In a forward military base? Where else would we put them? The hive swarms killed about 60,000 people when they took the city. We pulled out everyone we could find. This made no tactical sense. Civilians in a military installation consumed resources. They created security risks. They limited mobility. Every military manual in the galaxy agreed that non-com should be evacuated to rear positions or neutral zones. But the extra food requirements alone must strain your supply lines," Zixtai said. Rodriguez looked at him like he had asked why water was wet. "Yeah, it's tough. But we're not leaving people to die just because it's easier." They reached the command bunker, which was built into the side of a cliff. The entrance was hidden behind sandbags and metal plates. Rodriguez led them through a narrow tunnel that opened into a room filled with maps, communication equipment, and humans hunched over glowing screens. Colonel Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands. When he saw Zixtai, he walked over with a tired smile. "Welcome to Horizon Base," Morrison said. "I heard you're here to document how we fight." "That's correct. The Coalition wants to understand human military methods. Morrison and Rodriguez exchanged a look. The colonel rubbed his jaw and stared at the floor for a moment. Well, I hope you brought a strong stomach, Morrison said, because human warfare isn't like anything else in the galaxy. We don't fight like the textbooks say we should. Hell, we don't fight like anyone says we should. What do you mean? You'll see soon enough. The Hive is planning another push. Intelligence says they'll hit us tomorrow morning with everything they have. Probably try to overrun the North Wall and break through to the civilian shelters. Zick felt his recording devices automatically activate as his stress levels rose. Tomorrow, he would see human combat for the first time. He expected it to be crude but efficient, simple but effective. He had no idea how wrong he was. That night, as he lay in the small bunker they had given him, Zixty heard humans talking in the tunnels outside. They were discussing the coming battle, but not in the way Coalition soldiers would. They talked about protecting people, about holding the line no matter what, about things worth dying for. Zixty had covered wars where species fought for territory, resources, or political advantage. He had never heard soldiers talk about dying for strangers. The artillery in the distance kept rumbling like a storm that would never end.